Vorsprung durch Technik was an advertising slogan for VW in the UK that was incredibly popular for many years. And my guest this week is the embodiment of that slogan, progress through technology. In fact, Hans-Holger Albrecht actually started his working life in the automotive industry, but soon progressed to CLT, the forerunner of RTL. He built his reputation as a leader and innovator at the Swedish broadcasting giant Modern Times Group, and subsequent senior roles followed at Millicom, Deezer, and streaming audiobook service Storytel. Hans-Holger talks about the impact of technological innovation in all of the businesses he has run, working with legendary Swedish entrepreneur Jan Stenbeck, the evolution of the Viasat pay TV business into an SVOD streaming service Viaplay, and how we are moving to an access-driven economic paradigm and away from the ownership model. Enjoy. Hi Hans-Holger, welcome to the pod.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Excellent. Great to have you on board. I'm going to jump straight in because we've got lots of ground to cover. My first question is, were you a big fan of TV and film when you were growing up? And also, given the family heritage in politics, did you ever consider a career in public service in the political world?
Yeah, when I was a kid, I was a huge fan of television. Unfortunately, we had a TV which was as big as a book or iPad probably today. It was black and white. And my parents were quite restrictive how much TV we could watch. But clearly, I mean, in those days, television was the center of entertainment for every household and for every kid. So I could say I was a big fan of TV. I wasn't a junkie like other ones. So this is, I guess, more the kind of normal pattern. And in terms of looking for a career in politics, yeah, I always wanted to be in business first. So there was not really an option for me to think about, should I go into politics? I would have taken probably the opportunity if I would have been offered a job in politics later on. But since I lived abroad, of course, A, it was quite complicated, and B, I think the profile of politicians has changed quite a lot. It's a profession as well. It's a very specialist task. It's not like in the old days that you can jump between commercial side and political side so easy. So yes, deep in my heart, I probably would have done it and loved it, but the path was a different one, and I enjoyed it as well.
So your path took you into the TV world, and your first TV role was at CLT, the forerunner of RTL, and involved developing TV channels and services in Germany and around Europe. And if we break that down perhaps into three areas, was there a palpable sense of excitement in the early 90s about the potential of particularly Eastern Europe and the rise of private channels? It seemed like a bit of a revolution in the business around about that time.
Yeah, sure, there was, but there was even in Germany, which was the starting point, there was a big excitement. I mean, I remember when I joined, it was a tiny little business, the commercial television. And my mother was shocked that I didn't join other offers I had, like Mercedes-Benz or Bosch at the time, and go to an unknown company like RTL or CLT. But then all of a sudden it exploded, of course. And then after the Iron Curtain came down, it was a kind of natural view from a commercial company like CLT, other opportunities for us. And we started with radio like we always did, and then eventually followed with television. Nobody had a sense of the market potential, of course. Nobody had a sense how fast the economies will change. Yeah. But I was saying commercial television in the 90s was like the internet probably 20, 30 years later. Everything was possible, everything was dynamic. There were no paths you can just follow or copy. And you grab the opportunities when they came and try to do the best out of it. So that was the main driver to be in Germany first, and then of course go to Eastern Europe as well.
And in Germany going through a generational change, as you say, the downing of the Iron Curtain and the Berlin Wall, how did you approach domestic channel launches in Germany? Was that, again, an enormous sense of potential?
Yeah, I mean, it was it all started with the kind of liberalization of the law, so that commercial television was allowed, and that was when RTL and Sat1 were created and founded in a very complex shareholder structure, because the politicians at that time still wanted to protect the publishing houses and the printing business, as such, a newspaper business. But then, of course, since it became more and more established, we looked to, or we copied more or less what is happening in US. And US was quite advanced in terms of multi-channel environment, secondary channels, third channels, and so on. And I remember we flew over to US to study all the programming grids of those niche channels and so forth. And then we came to the conclusion in CLT, look, this will come to Germany as well. Let's start and launch additional channels. And we launched RTL2 as a first step, which was a bit driven as well that we had a huge inventory problem, like always in free TV on the main channel in RTL. But then we launched Super RTL and other channels. So what happened in US, this was a kind of golden rule at that time in commercial television. It will come 5 to 10 years later, latest, to Europe. So just look there, copy it, and do it exactly the same way.
And then another component, I think, was the decision to invest in Channel 5 in the UK. And in the context of the technical challenge and rolling out a new service in the face of the market power of ITV and to some extent the multi-channel world, what was the thinking at RTL in wanting to get into the UK market using Channel 5 as the way in?
Yeah, I wasn't fully involved in that one. I was more focused on Germany and Eastern Europe. But of course, I saw what happened on talking to the colleagues. I mean, the basic idea was that we said there is always room for a couple of commercial channels. Clearly, ITV, of course, was and is still a super strong channel. But we have been learning in France and in Germany as well, or Germany were number one, but in other markets as well, how to operate successful as a number 2 or 3. So there is this kind of multi-channel environment. You can find a way. A and B, of course, we had the belief, and we have proven it as well at that time, that we are very good operators, even in a very cost-efficient way. So, and last but not least, UK was a huge market, of course, in terms of advertising potential. And all those kind of criteria then led us to the decision should be invest in Channel 5.
So in 1997, you moved to the Swedish media company Modern Times Group, initially as head of pay TV operations at satellite platform Viasat Broadcasting, and ultimately president and CEO of MTG in 2000. How did you find the shift to a Swedish working culture, and specifically a business founded and led by legendary entrepreneur Jan Stenbeck?
In hindsight, it was the best thing I've ever done, probably, doing this step, because I learned an amazing amount of things from Jan and the group. I remember though as well, it was a big risk I took because I had a very good position in RTL and CLT, and I could have stayed there probably longer or go for something more established. And Jan was this kind of entrepreneur like Leo Kirch and Maxwell and Murdoch, all those guys who at this time were overstretching themselves, investing heavily in everything. And pushing always things to the limit. And I remember when I moved, the whole family had already a couple of children at that time as well. We moved to Sweden, and the landlord asked me, "So where do you work?" And I said, MTG and Jan Stenbeck. And then he said, "Oh, okay. So how long you want to rent? 2 weeks or 4 weeks?" Because it was a kind of process of rotation of top management as well in the Stenbeck group. So it was risky, but it played out well. And as I said, I owe Jan a lot in terms of opportunities and learning curve. And to work in the Swedish environment was a great experience for me as well, to adapt to new cultures, new people, new thinking. So it was probably one of the most important steps I made, or maybe the most important step I made in my career.
And is there a measurable difference between the way that German execs work and Swedish execs, for example? And
yeah.
Company culture?
There's a brutal difference. We Germans are very direct, as you know, and we take it not as an offense. That's the way we do it. And I remember when I had my first management meetings, I had a very nice and good number 2 guy, Peter Ramel, his name was. And he came afterwards to me and said, "You can't say it like this. You can't say this is shit or this is not good. You have to say in Sweden, this is a very interesting approach, but you may want to look from a different side as well." So I had to adapt a bit as well, but Jan was interesting. Jan was saying as well, no, don't change your way you do business, because it's good for the Swedes as well to learn something, a more direct approach and whatever. And then eventually it worked out. And so I guess we found together the Swedish culture and the German management style, and eventually, as I said, worked very well together.
Pay TV platforms have traditionally used sports and movies to drive growth. Were they the growth drivers for MTG in terms of subscribers, audiences, and advertisers? Was it a similar sort of pathway?
Yeah, when I joined pay TV, it was tiny. I mean, free TV was a big business. We made, I think, 700 million losses Swedish krona on a revenue of 1 billion. So it was a highly loss-making, not very big, sizable business. But then when we changed it and got it into order and launched the multi-channel environment, and then we launched our own satellite platform and did a couple of acquisitions, and then went into very early into streaming. It became by far the biggest business, of course, and overtook free TV quite strongly. So it made, at the end of the day, the story of MTG, or later on Viaplay, as it's called, in terms of broadcasting. But the combination, I always say, the combination of free TV and pay TV was quite powerful, and we played it very clever. So we had always a dual revenue income, and we had the cross promotion opportunity and the content amortization between free TV and pay TV, which I think was pretty unique in Europe at that time.
And as a new entrant into the Scandinavian market, did MTG have a challenger mindset and a bit of an outsider status, especially as a lot of the broadcast operations were actually not based in Scandinavia, but based in London?
Correct. We were the pirates, and always been the pirates for a long time. There were only 2 countries in the world who wanted to prohibit people to put up satellite dishes on the roofs, which was, one was Iran, and the second one was Sweden. So there was a kind of atmosphere we were working in. And then, of course, we were always edgy in terms of content and pushing it to the limit at that time. So we were the outcast, or the as I said, the wild pirates trying to conquer the market. And in that sense, we were a challenger, of course, as well. We always had to go against the incumbent, which was TV4 or TV2s. We had the big telecom company, Telenor, in pay TV, which was our competitor. So we learned to fight with limited resources, but with speed and creativity against the big guys. And yeah, it worked out quite well at the end of the day. But it needs a certain mindset and a certain kind of culture and a certain kind of team spirit as well in the company.
Viasat On Demand was launched in May 2007, and by 2011 had been rebranded as Viaplay. At what point did you decide that non-linear services would be as important, or indeed perhaps more important, than linear broadcasting? And also, given recent announcements, both about Viaplay specifically and streaming services in general, do you think the rush to non-linear distribution from traditional media companies has been a case of too much too soon, or were they left no choice by external pressures from competitors who were pure streaming, or even the analyst community who were insisting that everybody had to have a digital solution?
Yeah, well, the analysts, they don't look that far ahead normally. They just worry about the costs you occur. But I think for me, it became clear, I don't know anymore what exactly the trigger point was, but when it was the technology, and when I spoke to all the tech guys we had about the new opportunities, how you can distribute content in the future, that was quite fascinating. And around 2010, I thought this will eventually not replace, but will be the bigger part of how people consume media. And then, so there was a starting point that we have to go into this one. And then my view was, if we don't do it, somebody else will do it anyhow. And we got attacked. So rather create the competition in-house. And that was the kind of philosophy as well, that we say, look, we don't do it as an extended service of our services as a pay TV operator. We see it as a real competitor to our pay TV business. So we created a different structure, different team, different P&L, different reporting line directly to me. Gave them the unfair advantages that they got all content more or less the pay TV had as well, and they were screaming at us. We lose our subscribers and we lose our distribution on satellite and so forth. And on top, streaming got even a lot of free cross promotion, of course, on the free TV channel. So we really pushed it hard. But it became the value driver for Viaplay. It's probably one of the most successful, I guess, in terms of penetration streaming service coming out of the traditional broadcasters in Europe. I remember just an anecdote when I met Reed Hastings, and later on once he said, "Look, He said, I wanted to meet you. I said, why? "Yeah, because you launched Viaplay." I said, yeah. And he said, look, we looked around and this was the only competitor we really thought this is a serious competition. So we didn't go to Scandinavia that early because we had to fix other things first, because we realized this is heavy competition. So it was the right thing. And again, I don't think when you look forward that linear television will be replaced, but clearly the future and the money sits in streaming nowadays. I think the fact what we focused at that time already, we knew we didn't know that Amazon will come as well, but we thought we can't compete against the big international guys. So we go very, very local. So we focus on local content at that time, local sports and local shows. And that worked out quite well, of course.
In 2012, you became president and CEO of Millicom, an international telecoms and media company, which you helped to transform into a digital lifestyle operation. In your experience, how can a leader drive change and evolution in a large company with an existing legacy of operating in a defined way? And in particular, how do you introduce new ideas and bring people with you, especially when your experience as a leader is perhaps drawn from another industry?
Yeah, that's a good point. And it can be very hard unless you find again a company culture and a foundation with the employees we have who are open for this and curious and realize things are moving and can do it. And the good thing so was that the team I found when I joined Millicom was very open to change, very open to kind of new ideas and deep in the pocket. I mean, in emerging markets anyhow, there was an understanding there's an opportunity to go for kind of digital lifestyle operator as we did, we were the first one, I think, in the industry to do this in the world, I would say, but whatever. But it was one of the first ones. But then I agree to get this into the kind of sentiment of the people. I decided, whatever. We said, look, I need to do like a presidential campaign in the US. So we produced a movie, we produced a lot of things, presentations, and so forth and so forth. And then I was traveling around to every place twice and presented exactly the idea and the concept of the digital operator and why we do it, and this is how we do it, and our rules, and so forth and so forth. And that, to be honest, had a massive impact, because I remember when I joined Millicom, the company was flat in terms of growth and the margins were going down, the EBITDA margins. And when I left, I think the company was growing 17% again, which is quite a lot for a company of that size. And the margins were stabilizing around 40%. So it worked out very well, but you can't do it with every company. It's really, you need the support and the mindset. And I've been sitting in the boards of other telecom companies and who try to go digital, but they don't get it because the mindset is still at the end of the day a telecom operator.
And we talked about the difference between Swedish and German company cultures. Millicom's key markets were in Latin America and Africa. To what extent did your experience in European markets translate into those regions, or did you have to evolve to work and be successful working with those territories?
You have to evolve, obviously. You need to adapt a bit to local sensitivities, local cultures, local styles, and what you do. Equally, and that you could see even between Africa and Latin America and Europe, for example, there is a common language of business as well, and more, where certain things are easier. And again, when you come to this very fast-growing, very dynamic, young people population countries in Africa and Latin America, the speed, the kind of attitude is very, very different, of course, if you would go to big established Western markets, where people say, no, I've done this for 20 years, so, and they're going to continue like this. So there's way more like an entrepreneurial spirit in those countries, which makes it easier. So again, you need to adapt, you need to learn, but certain fundamental things always stay the same.
And part of the evolution at Millicom involved partnerships with other services, including music streaming service Deezer. And in 2015, you joined Deezer as CEO. If pay TV was built on exclusive content and a controlled supply of IP, how did you find the move to a business where the goal is the mass availability of content? And indeed, how did you find the dynamics of negotiating with a different set of rights holders in this new environment?
Yeah, I think that was, I mean, that was a massive change. But again, hindsight, probably the next to my move to Sweden, the second best decision I took in my career, because it was a bit for me. There was a personal element and there was a business element. On the personal element, it was a bit. Look, I've been a CEO of a $6-7 billion company. You fly with jets and you have drivers and whatever. And my view was, can you do something more hands-on again, and can you do something more like a startup? So instead of driver, you take Uber, and instead of the company jet, you take Ryanair or whatever, BA, something like that. So there was the kind of idea, let's see if I can reinvent myself, which was tough at the beginning. Of course, you have to adapt to the new style. But then after half a year, I loved it because, or a year, whatever, I loved it because it was really back to the basics and where you started. So that was the first thing. And then when it comes to the business itself, I agree. Or let's put it this way: when you work in telecom and when you work in media, and even with Viaplay, everyone thinks, and I thought as well, I'm a genius when it comes to digital business. When I joined in a real pure digital business, B2C, like Deezer, you realize you know nothing. I mean, you have to really learn a lot. So I had a pretty steep learning curve as well in the company. And yeah, you got as well to the point where you see, because of the structure, you negotiate, of course, with the big labels. It's like negotiating with the studios, but everything is non-exclusive. So you don't have a differentiation on the content. So it all boils down to how good is your product? How good is your product? How good is your marketing? And as I said, there was a big change in how I look at things, but it was a great experience.
And you now have a portfolio career with involvement in a number of companies and market sectors, including streaming audiobook service Storytel. In terms of broad customer market segments, where do you see the balance between the ownership and the access rental models in the modern economy? So is the switch to access and accessing media inexorable, or does the continued reliance and resilience of things like books and vinyl show that ownership retains this kind of visceral appeal to customers and consumers?
Yeah, I think I mean, this is a big debate, of course, but I think the economy is moving into access. So it's not the owning part anymore. If it's in the entertainment side, if it's in the mobility side, if it's in many aspects. So clearly there is a strong tendency to have access or rent, but not own it. But there will be always pocket of business where people want to own something. And books, for example, physical books won't disappear. There's no doubt about it. We haven't seen a drop in physical book sales, for example, even with audiobook streaming, because it's a very different experience you do. And vinyl, for example, yes, is growing again, but this is more nostalgica and whatever. It's a lifestyle people have there. But of course, in the bigger scope of revenues, it's not going to come close to what CDs, for example, or in the old days vinyl had. So fundamentally, I think we're moving to a kind of sharing society or access society instead of an owning society.
And from your extensive management experience, what's the one piece of advice you would pass on to a new CEO, A, in a mature business, and B, in a challenger growth industry?
Yeah, in a mature business, watch your back, because that would be my biggest advice, or most serious advice, because the life cycle of products has become so short. The amount of competition has increased significant, and if you overlook certain things, even as a number one or big incumbent, you can be in trouble very fast in the business. So nothing is for granted anymore, like it is in the old days. As a challenger, I think the key point again is what I said in terms of the incumbent as well. Be faster than the incumbent. The incumbents tend to change slow. They have to protect revenues. They have to protect margins. They have to protect certain kind of positions, and hence they don't see time as a weapon. A challenger has not this constraints and can be way more radical, and that's a big advantage, of course, you have. So you can really push very aggressively versus the incumbent. And hence, as I said, the challenger is fast and attacking, and the incumbent has to watch his back quite carefully. So whatever hat you have, good luck.
And what's the one piece of advice you would give to yourself, your younger self, in an earlier part of your career, based on what you've learned along the way?
it's a bit what I said a couple of minutes ago. If I look back in the MTG days, for example, the only thing we didn't take serious enough in 2000, whatever, 5 to 2010 was this whole digital transformation, new digital business models like classified business. Our competitor Shipstead, they did a very good job there, for example. So there we maybe missed an opportunity because we were so focused on our expansion into Eastern Europe. So that's the only thing, as I said, you could in hindsight look from a bigger perspective, you would do different. There are many other things, of course. I did wrong and we did mistakes and whatever you would correct in hindsight. But this is part of the development. I think nobody should expect that everything goes fine and you are the perfect manager. In terms of, I mean, I had always one philosophy, for example. For every crisis, there's a solution. So that was the kind of advice I always took, is that as bad as it is sometimes, you get a call in the morning, in the evening, or from somebody say, oh, boy, this is a big issue. There's a solution, you can find it, A. And B, the second advice I always took to myself as well is, let's make sure that you don't define yourself and your personality only of what you are in business. If that is the kind of approach, you have a big issue, because things may change and all of a sudden the whole thing, how you define yourself, is not there anymore. That can be quite bad. So I always try to find a good balance between my business life and my personal life, and not to be dependent on just one thing.
Well, bringing the personal and the business together, I always like to end with a fun question, and that's usually about my guests' media and the things that interest them personally. So if you were creating the ultimate streaming service, which one film, TV series, audiobook, and album playlist, or album or playlist, would you choose to offer subscribers in a monthly subscription?
Okay, that's not an easy one, because you have a lot of places. But on the movie side, I would say probably I would go for Godfather as a classic one. On TV series, I have to go as a media guy and knowing some of the actors probably there for Succession, the HBO series. On audiobooks, because I guess I have to hear it again and again, I would probably go Huckleberry Finn, Mark Twain. I love him. He's very good. And on one song as well, one music song, or one CD.
It could be an album. I started asking people about albums, and they said, well, nobody's got albums anymore. It's all playlists. But so it could be either.
Could be either. So I would go with the golden collection of ABBA, because ABBA is timeless.
Very good. I think you would be able to sell lots of subscriptions with having ABBA being part of it.
Yeah, that's for sure.
They have a perennial success. Well, Hans-Holger, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. It's been fascinating. It's been a career with modern times, revolutionary times, and I expect there'll be more exciting times in the future.
Future will tell, yeah. And thanks for this good conversation. It was fun.